Tonight's kind of a special night. 59 years ago, about this time, Grandma and I were just leaving the temple from getting married. And so that's kind of an occasion for us. Neither one of us thought we'd see this day. 59 years together, especially 59 years ago, we didn't even think about that. But anyway, through a lifetime together, some interesting things have happened, and Chris, being one of the older, has kind of kept a couple of traditions going for a number of years that the rest of the family's unaware of. One of them is every Christmas she gives me out of her desk, she takes a desk drawer and fills it with peanuts in the shell and almond joys and hard candy and soft candy and M&Ms. It's a box to remember, but she's carried that on and given that to us for a number of years. It's kind of been a soft spot for us. And then she wrote the story of the box. And she gave that to us tonight, and kind of where it come from. And so Grandma's going to read you a story tonight.
Cristi wrote this. You'll rapidly be able to tell. It says, Christmas was always magical for us children. It was a time for believing, for innocence, and for simplicity. It was a time for togetherness, something the 7th Ward in small town Spanish Fort got right. Each child looked forward to the Ward Christmas banquet all year. It was a big family dinner where children ran wild through the cultural hall. You were just as likely to be shushed or slowed down by Barbara Olson or Dean Bett as your own parent. The setup was simple. Long tables wrapped in plain white butcher paper and metal folding chairs that pinned small children between the seat and the backrest. Colorful fabric drawstring bags brought from home held plates and utensils and staked out the seating claim for each family. Gold plastic glasses, plates with butter cubes, and fat tin water pitchers beaded in condensation were the table's centerpieces. After a welcome from the bishop, dinner was served by the bishopric. By served, I mean you queued up in a line the approximate distance from the dessert table to the moon, which is about right. Clutching your plate to your chest and shifting from foot to foot, you inched closer to the open counter separating the kitchen from the cultural hall. I don't remember the main course. Roast beef? That comes to mind, served out of big roasters from metal spoons. Green beans, rolls, and every color of Jell-O completed the dinner assembly line. And for dessert, a table filled with a glorious assortment of sliced sheet cakes made by our mothers, frosted and decorated with colored sugar and sprinkles. It was a dream come true. That was just the business portion of the evening. What we really wanted, what we were really there for, was still to come. While dinner scraps were cleaned off the plate and restored to their gingham and rickrack carriers, we sang. Everyone sang. I think Mom always played the piano because there wasn't a single song she needed music or practice to play with perfection. Her flourishes and enthusiasm could get anyone to sing in a way Jenny May Home could not. There's none of you. Do you remember Jenny May Home? Bless her heart. No, she couldn't find a tune in an open bucket.
She had a voice that would carry to Springville.
Loud, clear all over. After several thousand Christmas carols and multiple rounds of the 12 days of Christmas, there was a secret signal given. I still do not know what it was, but when you heard Mom bounce into Here Comes Santa Claus right down Santa Claus Lane, it worked. He actually appeared at the back door of the cultural hall, shaking his bells and ho-ho-hoing his way down the aisles. It was pure happiness made manifest in squeals and cheers. A set of mobile wooden steps was hurriedly pushed up to align with the center of the stage, and Santa made his way there, hampered by his adoring fan base. His bulging sack slung over his shoulder, bumped between the aisles and off the heads of our parents. He finally cleared the wooden steps and took his seat of honor, a plain folding chair set in the middle of the stage. Dropping his sack to his left, pandemonium broke out as we children were invited. By invited, I mean the parents stopped restraining us. And we made a mad dash that should have resulted in several stampeding deaths, but never did, to sit on Santa's lap and give him our heart's desired Christmas wish. The line was long, at least the distance from the dessert table to the sun and back, as it inched forward with the speed of erosion. After all these years, I still can feel the excitement. I can still see the adults, moms and dads, old and young, smiling from the banquet tables, and us waving to them to make sure they were watching. And finally, it was your turn to be pulled up on Santa's knee. He asked your name, how old you were, and whether you'd been a good girl or boy. Of course, we all lied. And then he asked what we wanted him to bring for Christmas. We knew, of course, we were prepared. And he would give a loud, jolly laugh filled with hope, hand us a small brown paper bag from his red velvet sack, and send us ecstatically back to our parents. It was then that you opened your little bag. Inside was a mix of in-the-shell peanuts, saltwater taffy, caramels, and butterscotch hard candies. There were round red and white striped peppermints that should have resulted in several choking deaths and never did, and some white nougat version of fruitcake that no one liked. In that same category were squares of Neapolitan candies with a chocolate layer, a pink layer of unknown flavor, and white coconut layer. You only ate those if there was nothing else left. The peanuts that made a mess in the car on the way home, but I never remembered a word about that or cleaning them up, either one. The night was everything magical. At the same time, after the men put up the tables and chairs and you returned home, far too excited to sleep, you just knew in your heart it was real. When Dad was bishop of the 7th Ward, Santa was especially good to him. After all, Dad was most especially good. The desk in his office had a bottom drawer filled with unshelled peanuts, saltwater taffy, and butterscotch rounds, all the same Santa treats as our paper bags. Every Sunday after church, the gathering place was Dad's office. In the noise and hustle of Dun, where you were just as likely to be shushed by Fay Dredge or slowed down by Mont Gustin, we made our way to Dad's office and would plunge our little hands into the peanuts in the bottom drawer and wait for Mom. There was always the open drawer filled with the same mix of magic and love as the small paper bag. It was just as real, and to this day, I remember how safe and sweet it was to wait for Mom in Dad's office, shelling peanuts into the wastebasket, while I chattered on about something awful Carl Mackenzie had done. You'd have to know Carl Mackenzie to really appreciate that. The spirit and love of Christmas lingered long into the spring in the peanut mess against the dark red carpet that we never noticed or cleaned up. There is still magic and love in the memories and longing for the simple joy of plates in round drawstring holders, spoonfuls of green beans, singing carols, and peanuts. There is magic in remembering desk drawers of love in the shell and knowing whose you were and where you belonged. There is still the magic of love from parents who knew how to give it in a plain brown paper bag. And for me, that remains the miracle of Christmas.
Anyway, I called up Chris the other night and I said, my kidney doctor says, don't eat peanuts, too much protein. So I called her up in hopes of stopping the drawer. She said, it's too late. I've already made it. And so she made the drawer and brought it down tonight. So, in remembrance of long ago, take a sack. Since you brought it, you can have one too.
I need so much.
But those were the old days when wards were pretty flexible.
You see that? We could actually celebrate.
There you go, it's funny.
Child from a peanut allergy.
Yes, that's also so true. Fond memories. And the saddest thing of all is that you young people won't ever have those memories. Because they don't allow anything anymore. But there was a day. There was a day. Fun
Ward-
times.
Wards used to pull together a little bit easier. The men, probably 4 or 5 times a year, they haul hay 3 times a year on the church welfare farm. So the men gathered together to go do that. Then we hold beats at least twice a year. And then we had banquets all the time. There were 4 ward banquets a year. We'd get together as a ward and always had one this summer with corn and tomatoes.
People would bring tomatoes out of their garden, and that was a big source of pride. Who had the biggest sliced tomatoes?
Then she talked about the Christmas one. But besides the Christmas one, the primary put on a Christmas party every year, and you just died to go to that one.
If you weren't part of the primary, you just missed out on everything.
Well, you probably had half of the primary.
What was
Yeah.
the big primary?
Well, we weren't the biggest. Olson's had 12.
That's true.
And, you know, when Olson's left, our sacrament meeting went down 2 points. But it was just, it was kind of a different time for the church. It was,
I don't think our ward, did our ward, 7th Ward ever had a ward choir?
no,
I honestly don't remember they ever had a ward choir, but what they had was this, what they was called the Singing Mothers. And that was just women. And we met every Wednesday night, practice, gotta go to Singing Mothers, and off I'd go. And they furnished all the music for funerals, for ward, for whatever needed music for. Singing Mothers did.
and they were good.
Yeah.
And those old women pulled her in. She wouldn't have missed that for nothing, and she was a spring chicken
I
then.
was just a kid.
You know,
They were good to me. They just took me. They just pretended like I was one of them.
that is a ward made of World War II vets. That would have been in 1960. They would have been home just about 15 years. So they were in their mid-50s. All of them worked at Geneva. They were around, just happy to have work. I think in the ward there were 3 that were college graduates, 2 were school teachers. Everybody else went off to war at 17 and were uneducated in that form, but educated in life. Those families were just as solid as the earth, and it was a different time. But anyway, that's a little history of that time, and I'm glad you're all here tonight. It was
I forgot to tell them about ward bazaars.
and the other thing, every Christmas time, December was a nightmare. You had one night the primary party. I'm gonna cry over this one. Anyway, we had a Christmas party and took Mom to the hospital, and she was pregnant. And darn near lost her.
That was when Kelly was born, my hemorrhage.
Blood pressure was down to 0. And I walked back into that primary party and I said, I need some fresh blood. Seven minutes got up, walked out, went over to the hospital, gave her blood. We brought her home in a couple of days.
Montguston.
Who was it, Mont?
Montguston was one of them. I don't know who all went over, but
I don't know who all went over either. But her primary. And
he used to talk about it after, remember, for quite a while. Asked me how I'm doing with his blood. I'm doing just great, but I am losing my hair.
Now you know where your dad got it from. Paul Macy.
Unfortunately, he passed it on.
But anyway,
Good people.
that was something that's happened in the last 59 years.
But you started out to tell them about the Ward Bazaar.
You'll have to, I'm not up on it yet.
In those days, they had your ward budget. And it was a big deal. Everybody had to come up with X amount of dollars, whatever, to pay their ward budget.
At that time, the church didn't pay for everything.
Yeah, and if you had a building going on, then you had the building fund on top of all of that. So anyway, they used bazaars back in the day to help fund all of that. And women worked, honest to Pete, for months, 3 or 4 months prior to the bazaars coming. They'd make quilts, they'd make everything imaginable.
Well, they make
Children's
little
clothes.
girls' dresses.
Yeah, little kids' clothes and toys, and everybody got into it. Everybody had a project. Every organization had a project they were working on. They'd make candy, they'd big deal. And then, boy, Bazaar night, people flooded in from miles away. To come
All the
buy
Spanish
stuff.
would come.
Yeah, I mean, you just,
Other ward people would come and buy stuff.
some other ward was having a bazaar, everybody felt just fine going over to their bazaar, buying whatever they, and we always, because Dad was bishop for a lot of those years, we had to wait to see what didn't get sold. That's what we bought.
It was good stuff too.
Those are fun times, and those are the things that create a community out of the ward. And you have a hard time finding it now. Hard time finding it. I don't know that Julie was even old enough to remember much of that, were you?
Yeah, I got one of my Christmas dolls at one of those bazaars.
Yeah? Yeah, I saw that, you probably did.
Still have it.
Well, I'm glad you have some memories of it.
Thank you for the memories, Chris.
Thank you for the memories.
It was a good time. And 59 years ago tonight, I owned a 55 Pontiac. Two-door coupe. Had a back seat. Had a back seat, but it didn't have a heater. Had a heater, but the heater hoses ran underneath the car in the open, and then up to a fan and a heater under the seat. And in theory, it was great because it blew air all around your feet, front seat and back seat. Except it was cold enough that the hoses froze. Her mother and I and her jumped in that car, snow. The snow on the floorboards we kicked off her feet was still there when we got to Salt Lake. Never melted.
And listen, this is before the days of the freeway, okay? You went the old
State
highway
Street all the way.
through every town. It'd take you an hour and 20 minutes, half hour, hour and a half to get.
Took an
somewhere.
hour and a half to get there
Yeah.
on good days.
You can talk.
But you were all the results of that night. If that night hadn't happened, none of you would be here. Including us.
Getting down?
A lot happens in 59 years.
And you know, the blessing of it is you not only have your own children, which have all been wonderful, good kids. We haven't got a complaint. All of them good kids.
You might have some complaints about me later.
Nope, nope. And they went out and found good partners, or with some that appeared to be good partners.
It happens.
It happens. Yes, it does. But have just added to. Have just added to the family. And we just love you all. Everybody belongs. It's good. It's good.
Well, then what do we do for your 60th next year? Parties.
Party. We're gonna, you know, by the time we get through with COVID, we're gonna go party bonkers.
Speaking of COVID, I talked to Dave the other night. I saw Mel the other night and Dave was there. And he had COVID and he had a bad deal of it. And his wife went to the hospital. And they give her a shot of something. And she come home and healed right up. He never went to the hospital. And he says he spent 2 weeks of the worst 2 weeks of his life. And he says his breathing is still affected. He says, I do not have the wind to do anything anymore. And he just said, if I had it to do over again, I'd go to the hospital and get a shot. He says Marlene, his wife, got over it quick and things went well, and he says, I toughed that bugger through and I'm still carrying it. So, think about it if you get COVID.
Just bypass everything, go straight to the hospital.
I need a shot of something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever you have. Mess severe or something.
Let's see.